Hi, everyone. We're just waiting for the Zoom to load everybody in. We'll get started shortly. Hi, everyone. For those just joining, we still got our participants ticking up here, so we'll give it another minute or two.
If people would like to share in the chat where they're coming from today, their state and your name, please feel free to do so. There's also a Q&A function, so if you have a question, please use that and so it doesn't get lost in the chat.
All right, it looks like we are slowing down on folks loading in, and we're very appreciative that Congressman Frost is here with us, so why don't we go ahead and get started? Welcome, everybody, to this post-Grants Pass meeting of all the folks who have been so involved in this case. We wish we were here under different circumstances. Um, but from the beginning of this case, we said that we had really two missions. One was to influence the court, um, and the second was to build the movement, because we knew that the court was never going to solve homelessness for us. And what we need is really a multiracial, cross-sectoral movement to put in place the policies and bring the resources that we need to actually end homelessness. And so while it's unfortunate that the court decided against us, and that will certainly set us back in our mission, and will cause immediate harms to people living on the streets. And we want to acknowledge that what they can't take away from us is the information that we have shared, the bonds that we have made through this process. And we are coming out stronger as a movement for this. And so I think we are going to be talking today on this webinar and on conversations long into the future about the steps that we're still going to take, because we know that we need to, in order to protect the folks who are on the streets, and get us to a place where everybody can enjoy their basic human right to housing. Um, and while we don't want to rest our hopes on charismatic leaders, while this needs to be a bottom-up movement, we do need people with lived expertise in housing instability, homelessness, racial discrimination, and other forms of oppression and in positions of power at the table, making decisions, making policy. And that is why it is fantastic that we have Representative Maxwell Frost here with us today. Representative Frost stood shoulder to shoulder with us in front of the Supreme Court, and back home in his district, Florida's 10th congressional district, on the day of the oral arguments. And that solidarity means so much to us Representative Frost, and we thank you for it. And we're going to need you going forward. So we look forward to continuing to work together. And with that, I will, know your time is limited, so we'll turn it right over to you.
Eric, thank you so much for having me. And hello, everybody. Like Eric said, I mean, it's a blessing to be here in fellowship with all of you in this struggle. The reason we're here is a horrible reason. And for those of you who don't know me, my name is Maxwell Frost. I proudly represent Central Florida, which includes the city of Orlando, Florida, in Washington, D.C. My city recently passed an ordinance that effectively criminalizes sleeping outside as well. For the sake of my community, and for the sake of our nation, I had hoped for a different outcome in this case. And like it was said, I was proud in April to join the National Homeless Law Center and many other partners outside of the Supreme Court to rally in saying housing, not handcuffs. When we fight for the unhoused, not only are we fighting for those currently experiencing houselessness, but we're also fighting for the nearly 1 out of 4 people in America who worry that they might soon become houseless and homeless. Nearly half of renters who pay more than they can afford in rent. And this is very personal to me. Some of y'all know my story. I mean, when I decided to run for Congress and the rent hike freeze was taken away in the state of Florida, my rent went up 33% in just a week. I received that text and knew I couldn't live there anymore, got priced out of my apartment, and experienced homelessness for 2 months during my campaign while I was running for Congress. Not just that, but I thought it'd all be fine once I got elected. And then when I got elected, I found out because my credit was so bad because of the campaign, I was denied housing even when I was an elected member of Congress to live in Washington, D.C. Y'all know more than anyone that homelessness is a housing crisis, especially in the United States of America. And this is because of decades of Congress continuing to defund HUD, to defund federal housing programs that has really jump-started and caused this problem, obviously starting under President Reagan. And the reality is that local governments have robust funding to deal with this. We know this because we see the robust funding going to things like police departments and other things. But then for some reason, they have sparse resources when it comes down to housing initiatives. When they're pressured, this is why we need to pressure them to act on the housing crisis instead of reaching for false solutions. While our local partners should not turn to carceral solutions just because the Supreme Court says they can, we need Congress to act on this crisis now. Now that the courts have ruled against the interests of our people, it's up to all of us to assert our power and call our elected officials at the federal level to step in. We're talking about universal rent assistance for low-income households. We're talking about repairs and preservation of public housing. We're talking about a national housing trust fund. We're talking about eviction and homelessness prevention. We're talking about voluntary supportive and emergency response programs, more housing for people, affordable housing for people, and passing my bill, the End Junk Fees for Renters Act, which would eliminate the use of credit scores in determining whether or not someone can rent and take away junk fees so we have low barrier to entry housing. But the problem here is on one end, we have the Republican Party from Ron DeSantis to Speaker Johnson that want to fund war and want to fund other things more than they want to fund the housing of our people. And I know everybody on this call, all 767 of us, agree that housing is a human right. And if you care about education, if you care about the economy, if you care about gun violence, if you care about defeating the climate crisis, whatever issue you care about, we need to make sure our people have a home. This impacts every issue under the sun. And I know it's a tough day. It's a tough couple of weeks in terms of the Supreme Court. What some dreadful and horrible decisions, especially this one. But I want to give y'all some hope. The movement I got me involved in politics was the gun violence movement. I got involved in politics because I didn't want to get shot in school. And I grew up in a movement that when the most people cared about it is when the most people were dying. And unfortunately, it's a similar thing in the housing movement that the most people, when the most of the general public starts talking about it, is when they're directly impacted by those soaring rent costs. The fact that every $100 that goes up in the average rent, we see a bump in 9% on homelessness and houselessness. Now that more people are being impacted, more people are talking about it. But I just want to give you all the flowers you deserve, because you've been fighting for this day in and day out for decades, and I appreciate you all for all the work you've done. This movement is powerful. This movement is more powerful than our opposition. We just need to continue to elect leaders who actually give a damn about our people and will actually create a country that works for everybody. Because in the words of the late, great Congresswoman Barbara Jordan, what the people want is simple: a country as great as its promise. And I'll tell y'all, patriotism is more than just bald eagle flag and beer. It's about making sure that our people have housing and our people have the resources they need to live their best lives. And I don't care if you're a Democrat, Republican, Independent, or anything. This is about the people versus the problem and about loving humanity. So thank you all so much for the work that you do. I love you. And in the spirit of leading with love, let's continue this fight. We've been dealt a blow, but we have not lost this battle. And so we'll continue to fight. Thank you so much for having me today.
Thank you so much, Congressman. We appreciate you. We will need you, and we'll be in touch to keep fighting this battle together. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Antonia Fasanelli, our executive director, to talk more about what the court did, and what we can understand about it going forward. Folks, in addition to the chat, if there's any specific questions, please put them into the Q&A as opposed to the chat, and that'll help us keep track of them. We will have time for going through those towards the end of the presentations. So, Antonia.
Thank you so much, Eric, and thank you so much, Congressman Frost. That was wonderful, and we're delighted to have you here. We wish it were under the circumstances of a different decision, but we are proud to have you in this fight, and thank you so much for being here. And thank you to everyone, now the 788 people who are part of this Zoom. You are all part of this community, and we're grateful to have you here. I'm going to provide just an overview of the decision and its impact, and then turn it quickly over to my colleague, Will Knight from the Law Center. But here's what happened on Friday. Despite widespread understanding that everybody needs a safe place to sleep, the U.S. Supreme Court, in a shameful and unsurprising ruling, ruled that people who are unhoused and people who are living in vehicles are not included in the Constitution's protections against cruel and unusual punishment. That decision sets a dangerous precedent for the 250,000 people who sleep outside each night in the United States, and for the millions of families who are just one missed paycheck away from houselessness. This ruling makes it easier to jail or ticket anyone who is unhoused or anyone who is sleeping in a vehicle for doing so in public spaces. And unquestionably, this ruling will make homelessness worse. We know that having a ticket, having a fine, or having an arrest on your record makes it dramatically harder to be able to move out of homelessness and into housing. Allowing this kind of action to move forward will make homelessness worse. We also know that this ruling will have a disproportionate negative impact on persons of color who are already represented in the population of unhoused persons in a disproportionate way and are already targeted by police more than persons who are Caucasian. There's no question that this will be felt more. The town of Grants Pass, Oregon, from which this case originated, has a history of racist decisions. Grants Pass was a sundown town meaning that persons of color, particularly Black persons, could not be in Grants Pass after sundown. That history built upon Oregon's history of recapturing lands with force from Indigenous persons. So sadly, the decision to ticket and fine its unhoused residents in order to make Grants Pass so unlivable for them that they would leave built upon this racist and exclusionary policy history within Grants Pass. It is a tragedy that this town with this history has now informed homelessness policy across the country. But as you will hear, you've already heard, and I will say, we are going to continue to fight. We have already seen elected officials say that they are going to use this decision to aggressively move to ticket and fine and arrest unhoused residents who are sleeping in public spaces. We are aware of this and we are ready to fight. We are not giving up because of this decision. We are calling on Congress and we are calling on state and local elected officials to resist that temptation to punish unhoused persons and instead invest in affordable housing in their communities. We must now, the time is now to have a meaningful response to homelessness once and for all. Thank you so much, and I'm proud to turn it over to my colleague, Will Knight, from the National Homelessness Law Center.
Thank you, Antonia, and thank you all for being here today. I'm Will Knight. I'm the Decriminalization Director for the National Homelessness Law Center. I'm also a Colombian immigrant. I am directly impacted by homelessness myself. And I'm an attorney here based in Phoenix, Arizona. I've been doing this work with the Law Center for the last 2 years now. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I think Justice Sotomayor described the opinion best when she said that the Supreme Court just told 650,000 homeless Americans that they can, and I'm going to quote, either stay awake or go to jail, period. So that's the situation we're in, but we are not without options. So first, let me talk about in Grants Pass and in the Ninth Circuit generally, what happens next. First, it's important to remember that this opinion was only addressing the cruel and unusual punishment clause of the Eighth Amendment. The Eighth Amendment has more language in it than just about cruel and unusual punishments. It also talks about excessive fines. And there was a ruling that was won at the district court and at the Ninth Circuit. It was affirmed and then reaffirmed at the Ninth Circuit before it went to the Supreme Court under the excessive fines clause. So that still exists. And the case is going to be remanded now to the Ninth Circuit to figure out if that has changed at all. And we're cautiously optimistic that it's still going to exist. What it really does mean is we can't rely on the Johnson v. Grants Pass precedent there anymore. We can't rely on the Martin v. Boise precedent that came before it. For the rest of the country, that's the real big takeaway, is that we have lost the ability to make these Eighth Amendment cruel and unusual punishment claims under the Eighth Amendment, under the Martin v. Boise, Johnson v. Grants Pass theory. Like I said, we are not without options. Even in the majority opinion, Justice Gorsuch said that there are other protections that still exist. And Justice Sotomayor's dissent, I highly encourage you to read it. It's tough given the context, but she does really go through a whole lot of information there that can be used in future cases. And it's stuff that most of us have already heard about. So I'm going to talk about a few different categories. First, some strong claims that can be made and that are already viable that we know about and that we really need to be focusing on when we are considering taking legal action on behalf of unsheltered homeless communities. Those are statutory claims. So the Americans with Disabilities Act is a really strong statutory cause of action. We also have federal religious freedom statutory causes of action, And we have state causes of action and state laws that enshrine those as well to different degrees in various states. But it's really important to remember those, given, like Congressman Frost is pointing out, the intersectionality of who experiences homelessness and the different populations of vulnerable people who can have claims that aren't available to everyone, but if you do happen to qualify for them, they're available to you, and they're very strong. There's a lot of good case law on them. They're also very, very empathetic. It's difficult for folks to try and turn that into something it's not. State constitutional claims also. I'm not going to get too far into the weeds about this, but I do want to stress that it is important to take a look at those when you're talking to your lawyers about these cases, because states have constitutions that sometimes provide more protections than the federal constitution does. There's a case out of Washington just recently. It's on appeal right now, but they found that their privacy clause, their Fourth Amendment corollary, applies to people sleeping in tents. And that means that you have to get a warrant. That is huge. That's really helpful. There's a case in New Mexico under their similar privacy clauses that might be going the same way. And we may see some cases out of Utah and a couple of other states kind of in the Midwest to the West Coast doing the same. Now, there are some strong claims that will need some development, but I'm really excited about these claims. Those are any claims that involve forced or denied movement. So that's the category I'm putting it under. But really, it's two different constitutional theories. One is the right to travel, that all of us have a right, whether it's under the Privileges and Immunities Clause or it's a matter of due process. We have a right to enjoy, to travel around the country, to be citizens and residents of this country. That includes, and this is more defined in some circuits than others, but that could include a right to travel within a state and inherently the right to not have to travel, the right to stay in your community and stay home. So if you have a lot of that happening, if you have a lot of folks who are being displaced and forced out, then those are possible claims you can bring there. The one I'm most excited about, this is a little wonky, so I'm not going to get too far into it, but that's the Dormant Commerce Clause. It sort of falls under this theory as well. And it says that states can't interfere with interstate commerce. Displacing your vulnerable homeless population and sending them across state borders to other states because you don't want to do right by your community and you want to make it somebody else's problem has a massive impact on interstate commerce. So we are really interested in having conversations about folks who see that happening to their community. Now, some novel claims, they're also strong, but these are really important because they were brought up at length during the oral argument, and they were discussed some in the opinion itself. So first of all, necessity defense was something that we talked about a whole lot. The necessity defense, for anyone who doesn't know, is what's called a justification defense. A justification defense is a defense that applies in criminal cases that says, for one reason or another, even though the act that is prohibited occurred, you did it in furtherance of some other greater moral good that outweighs the harm caused by it. So, for example, if you're stuck in a tornado and you break into a gas station to not get killed by the tornado, you probably aren't going to be charged for trespassing. You have pretty strong necessity defense. Well, it's pretty clear that should apply in these cases. There are some problems, though. Not every state has the necessity defense enshrined in their laws to apply in the criminal courts. Also, cities can choose to not seek jail time on minor offenses like these. And if they do, then that means that folks aren't entitled to a public defender. And if you don't have an attorney, you probably don't know that you have a necessity defense that you could raise in these cases. Practically speaking, this is also hugely problematic because it means people are going to have to go through that criminal process just to assert that defense. So as a matter of using the courts to help communities writ large, we do want to look for anyone who has gone through that tragic situation that might be able to make a strong habeas claim that we can then use the federal courts to set precedent on. But more importantly, if there are communities where that defense is just not applicable because of how the city is operating, how they're choosing to operate, they discuss this at oral argument, and it can be brought as a class for affirmative injunctive relief like the ones that we were doing before. So that's what we still have in front of us. I do want to move it to the next couple slides real quick, Antonia. I want to remind us that this is not a situation that was ever going to be solved by the courts. We know that. We've been studying the rise of homelessness criminalization at the municipal level since 2006. This data is from our 2019 Housing Not Handcuffs criminalization report. We have a new report coming out this year that unfortunately shows it's even worse. So if you can go to the next slide, Antonia. All of this is really being compounded right now by efforts by some billionaire think tanks. I'm gonna call them that, but that's not really what they are. Either way, some institutes like the Cicero Institute, the Manhattan Institute, a couple of other folks like that that are pushing for increased homelessness criminalization policies. Like Congressman Frost was saying, now is the moment. It is incredibly important that we use the momentum and the attention that we have to fight those efforts and to demand from our policymakers that they protect access to decent, affordable housing all around the country at all levels. That's local, that's at the state level, and critically, it is at the federal level, both in Congress and also through the Biden administration. So with that, I'm going to hand it back to my colleagues.
Thanks so much, Will, for that legal overview, both what we lost and all of the things that we still have and that we can still keep fighting with. But to move from kind of that abstract level to the very concrete level, we want to bring in our friend Helen Cruz, who's a resident, has lived outside in Grants Pass, and continues to work with people who are still living there. Can you tell us a little bit about how you're feeling, Helen, and what this decision means to you?
I'm feeling a bit frustrated. So is everybody here. The homeless community here is very frustrated. They're being left with the a fear of going to jail. They're being left with the uncertainty of not knowing where they're going to be going. Because ultimately, it's going to take effect to where they are going to, they've always been issuing tickets, but it's just going to be worse because the Supreme Court's ruling has made it to where law enforcement can be even harder and make it even harder on the homeless community out here. And it's a big fear that everybody has right now. And, I spent, after the hearing came in, I spent a day and a half just going around and trying to reassure people and, trying to let them know that, for now, everything's okay, but it's not okay. And their biggest question was, where are we going to go? What are we going to do? And, it's very frustrating for me not to be able to have an answer for them, because, I don't even know. I do know that city council over here, I go in front of them all the time about the homeless situation and about there being no housing. And, and I see all this funding going out to law enforcement and everything, and I see benches being taken out where, there could be using the funding for the homeless and the housing. So I don't know, the uncertainty right here. It's a very uneasy feeling. And they're in fight or flight mode right now. And they're more geared towards fighting, and it's not in a good way. And I'm trying to keep them at bay, so to speak, right now. Just trying to get them to focus on, that this isn't the end of the road. There's still hope out there. There is people.
Thank you so much, Helen. Yeah, it's not an easy time for anybody, and particularly not for those who are on the streets and who are, I think that the idea that this decision is somehow not cruel and unusual, just that uncertainty alone for people is cruel and unusual to them, and it is a form of torture that has been recognized by international human rights experts, and it is a kick in the face to people that to say that It's not cruel and unusual under our Constitution. But I want to move now to Marcy Thompson from the National Alliance to talk about some of the ways that things are going to get worse, but also how we can pivot to some solutions. So, Marcy.
Yeah, thank you so much, Eric. As Eric mentioned, I'm with the National Alliance to End Homelessness, and I am here today on behalf of our CEO, Antonia, who was supposed to be here today, but I'm filling in for her instead. And this is such a critical conversation to have. So thank you to the Law Center for organizing it and just for all of the leadership. Yeah, I think as all of us on this call know, and certainly has been alluded to today, we know that criminalization or laws that penalize people for sleeping in public and for experiencing homelessness, we know that they do not work. And this isn't just anecdotal information. The research on this is pretty clear. Not only is it ineffective in ending homelessness for a person or community, it actually does not do what many elected leaders say that they want, which is to deter people from living outside. The negative impacts on systems, on the homeless service providers, and most importantly on individuals are great. So if we look at the system costs, there have been a lot of different studies out, but a couple in particular, the city of LA was evaluating an encampment ban that had come out. They did looked at this for a couple of years, and what they found was that they had 174 encampments that were cleared out, and among the report's findings, the vast majority of encampments actually came back. Unhoused people came back at high rates, with 81% of encampments having had people return. And nearly all encampments reemerged after the clearing. And there's been a study recently. I know Hannah Leibowitz was one of the primary researchers. I think, Eric, if you can put a link to that in the chat. And that, by and large, found that contrary to a deterrence logic, the results indicate that local anti-homeless ordinances cannot be relied upon to reduce the number of people experiencing homelessness. So at the end of the day, I heard someone once say, criminalizing homelessness is a really expensive solution that does nothing to solve the problem. And I think that's really wise. And so what we're really focused on is to think about the things that truly work, to make sure that we are putting forward solutions that are reducing the impact and the trauma in communities and are really working on reducing homelessness overall. As a field, we need to focus on the solutions because I think it's important that we not forget homelessness is a policy choice, but solving homelessness is too. So leaders should be focused on the long-term solutions that we know work, which is safe and affordable housing, and ensuring that people have access to the types of supports and services that they want and need in order to thrive. At the same time, we need to be supportive of communities and understand that every community is different. The resources that you have are different. So how do we make sure that the communities have the support to be able to do the work that they're doing, to put forward evidence-based practices? We need to make sure that we're investing in the production and preservation of housing affordable to those with the lowest incomes. We need to make sure that we're investing in more robust, or we're getting more robust funding for our nation's targeted homeless assistance programs. And we're making it easier for people to access the health and behavioral health services that they need. Because at the end of the day, communities are safer and stronger when everyone has a safe place to call home. And we will need to all be in this work together to fight for the future that we deserve. I think we all feel this sense of urgency, as we should, to get to the future that we want. But I think we also need to remember that with that urgency, we need to also know that this is a marathon. And so we need to make sure that we are spending our energy in the ways that are going to be most effective, and that we're not kind of foregoing things like our equity focus in order to move quickly. I think that is sometimes something that we hear is that communities kind of move too quickly to try and put together new actions. But we want to make sure, as I think Antonia mentioned earlier, we know that people of color, people with disabilities, and people who are LGBTQ are overrepresented in people experiencing homelessness. So we need to make sure that in all of our efforts, when we're talking to legislators, when we're designing the strategies that communities want to implement, that you're using your data, and most importantly, that you're listening to people who are directly impacted. Now is the time that we need to put our elected officials at every level of government on notice, and we need to hold them accountable. With more than 18,000 people becoming homeless for the first time each week, it is time for a reckoning in this country, because people become homeless because of the choices of our leaders, not the choices of the individuals who become homeless. I definitely believe in a future where housing is a human right, where healthcare is a human right. But to bring that to reality, it's going to take an army of advocates to bring that to fruition. So I will put a couple of links in the chat. I know the Alliance has a Take Action page that you can sign up for. Many of our partner organizations do as well. But you could go to the Alliance's page to sign up for our action alerts, get resources about successful advocacy strategies. And just today, we'll be sending out an action alert that will include an action for you to call on your congressional members to sign on to a letter to President Biden, calling on the administration to take action now. And once you've done those things, reach out to your networks and ask them to do the same. Because it's going to take all of us to make all of this a reality. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Marcy. Before I move it back to Antonia, I just want to say that we apologize for the racist comments being made in the chat. Because of the high number of registrants, we weren't able to actively be monitoring that for a little bit, but we are working on trying to turn off comments. But anybody who's making those kinds of comments is going to be ejected. With that, I want to turn it over to Antonia.
Absolutely. And thank you very much to the team for handling that. And again, I'm so sorry if that was, I know that was difficult to see. I'm going to pick up where Marcy was speaking to talk about our efforts to call on elected officials to invest significantly in housing and services and emergency responses to homelessness. If you've been following the Law Center's materials that we've been sending out, you won't be surprised by the 356 figure. $356 billion is our demand for a federal down payment for housing in the U.S. just to respond to the immediate crisis. I encourage you all to go to johnsonvgrantspass.com. That is the Law Center's website on the Grants Pass case. And if you go to /solve-homelessness, you will get another take action alert. You'll get more information about what is included in that $356 billion figure. The time is now. The time is now for the federal government to fix what it started decades ago, as Congressman Frost mentioned, in divesting in affordable housing. We need to invest in affordable housing now, and we need to do it in the billions in order to truly have an impact in ensuring that every person in this country has access to housing. So please go to that website, and I'll put it in the chat as well. In addition, the Law Center has prepared draft bills, draft template pieces of legislation that you all can use to take to your state and local legislators to enshrine in state law or local law the rights of unhoused persons against tickets and fines and arrests. This is an important step to continue to protect the rights of unhoused persons until we start to see some of that $356 billion being invested in affordable housing for folks. Please reach out to the Law Center, to my colleague, Eric Tars. He'll put his email in the chat to get copies of that template legislation. We are here to provide support as you start to work those bills through your local and state legislatures. We will be talking a lot more about that approach in the coming weeks. We are here to support you in whatever you need to be able to get that kind of legislation pushed forward. And I should say, in addition, we are also here to help beat back the harmful bills, like the bills that Will Knight was talking about, advanced by the Cicero Institute and other investors to try to punish unhoused persons. We are here to support you in that no matter what. So with that, I am going to put in the chat the link to the Grants Pass website and the Solve Homelessness page. And Eric, I think that means we're ready for Q&A. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. Also, I know, Helen, you cut out earlier. I don't know if that was just you needed a moment for yourself, or if it wasn't purposeful, if you had anything else you wanted to say.
No, my phone actually died, but I just wanted to say that I've been doing my best over here to let people know not to give up hope. That there is people out there who really do care, and we absolutely appreciate all your guys' support. And it's good to know that somebody cares, and it's amazing that there are so many people out there that do care about humanity and people having homes. And I just want to see something different, and I'm hoping to see some type of change. And I'm going to keep pushing back with my lawmakers, my Congress, my council, and everything. I'll keep showing up to city council meetings, despite, they don't really care for me, but that doesn't matter to me. I think the more they see my face, maybe they'll start doing something. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you, Helen. All right, with that, I know we've got tons of questions. I want to set expectations now that we are not going to be able to get to all of them. I think we have the ability to save them, and we'll try to follow up with people afterwards for the ones we aren't able to get to. But I want to turn it back to Will right now for a couple of, I think a lot of people are looking at what's the immediate impact of this going to be. Do police have a right to throw away our personal property? How is this decision going to affect groups like Food Not Bombs who try to ameliorate the effects of homelessness? If you want to start off with a couple of responses there, I think that'll help people understand what's going on.
Thank you, Eric. And Des Martinez, thank you for your question. Des asks, hi, Des with We Are Not Invisible from Fresno, California. Do the police have a right to throw our personal property away? They showed up this morning tossing all property away. What do we do? Thank you for bringing that up. That is really important. And homeless people do enjoy Fourth Amendment protections. That is undisturbed by this awful case. And that is well settled law all around the country. Being poor doesn't mean that you do not have a right to a reasonable expectation of privacy and that you do not have the right to own property. Practically speaking, does that mean that the police respect that right? Not necessarily, like you just pointed out, but you do have viable causes of action if the police are indiscriminately throwing away people's property in connection with an arrest. They're supposed to be impounding it along with your personal property. If they're arresting somebody, if they're conducting a sweep, they really ought to be putting it somewhere where you, with a legitimate way to keep it safe and for the person to go get it back afterward. That doesn't always happen. And a lot of the cases that are existing around the country and ongoing have claims that sound under the Fourth Amendment for that exact reason. If that's happening in your community, then you can take legal action. Let's see, then Alexandra Dixon, how will this affect groups like Food Not Bombs who try to ameliorate the effects of homelessness? Thank you for asking that question. Right now, this opinion doesn't do anything to directly impact advocates or service providers in this space. But as we've seen with increasing frequency over the last couple of years, it is likely to embolden folks who want to pass laws that make it a crime or a finable issue to provide services, to provide food, to provide other things. There are lots of other, again, constitutional rights that can be brought that can help there. The First Amendment, probably the biggest one that is a little bit different from what we've been talking about today, that you might enjoy as an organization who wants to provide services and wants to help homeless people. So if you're finding that your local policymakers are interfering with that or passing new laws, you may have causes of action as well. There are, in fact, a few cases. I think there's one out of Delaware that Food Not Bombs is currently a plaintiff in, and it has a lot of claims that are going to be undisturbed by this case because of that. There are a lot more. We're going to get to them all, but those are the first two that I grabbed to answer live.
Yeah, no, thank you, Will. There have been a couple of questions about kind of continuing the conversation. So this meeting is being recorded, and we can share the recording link afterwards. I think we want to keep this relatively within our community. I don't know that we will be publicly posting it, but this is but people will be able to access the recording afterwards. I've seen some people asking about transcripts. I don't know that will be available, but the recording should be available. And in terms of continuing community with one another, if you go to the Johnson v. Grants Pass website, or housing.handcuffs.org website, both are places you can sign up for our mailing list and in the Housing Not Handcuffs campaign. And we have a listserv there where people can talk about these things across communities, organize, and help to create the national solidarity across communities, the trans-local solidarity that we need to be able to address these things. So those are both out there as resources for people. And then let's see here. We are not currently planning a march on DC, but I've seen definitely in the chat folks talking about the Poor People's Army movements for the marches to the RNC and the DNC. Those are great places to direct your organizing efforts. And I know that the Poor People's Campaign also recently had a march in DC. So there will definitely be opportunities to get out in the streets as well. And we will be sharing, go sign up for the mailing list to continue getting information about those, or to the Poor People's Army and the other websites that have been shared in the chat. I don't know if anybody else is.
That
Go
I
ahead, Will.
if I can, Eric, just that are all similar. So Patricia, thank you for being here. Patricia Nix Hodes asks for a little more context on the excessive fines claim and what the Ninth Circuit will be deciding on that on remand. That's actually a little up in the air right now. So it is a completely separate holding for the injunction. It is factually connected because of the way the case was brought and the way that Grants Pass was enforcing the ordinance, a little intertwined with the cruel and unusual punishment clause claim. So there's going to have to be some discussion about separating them out and whether this opinion changes the applicability of it. But I think there are very strong arguments and strong reasons why it doesn't and it shouldn't. I don't want to predict right now because it's a little early to say. Let's see, we also have a couple of anonymous ones, but these are important ones that I've seen a few folks ask something similar. Can we repeat or summarize what we said about invoking religious freedoms? In the interest of time, I'm not going to repeat all of it, but similar to the next question, can we get a one-pager? We will have more webinars like this in the future. We also have our Housing Not Handcuffs Justice Network for anyone here who's an attorney working on these cases. That one is for counsel so that we can enjoy some common interest privilege as we discuss strategies. But we also have our monthly meetings of our Cicero working groups and our Housing Not Handcuffs listserv in general, where we all stay in touch and communicate with each other around the country and try to provide support when municipalities start changing their policy and harming your homeless community.
And also note on our website, you can find both our Housing Not Handcuffs litigation manual from 2017 and our 2021 supplement to that manual, which updates all the case law. But kind of the manual itself is where you can find the broad description of all the different claims, and then the supplement just brings the case law pieces up to date. So those are resources on our website, homelesslaw.org. Go to publications and you can find them there, or just Google Housing Not Handcuffs litigation manual and litigation manual supplements, and you should be able to find those.
Eric, India Pungacher in Tennessee asks if you can repeat how to access the template bills that we prepared.
The template bills should be on our website, or on a link will be up on the Housing Not Handcuffs website by the end of the day today. We are still finalizing it.
I just
go ahead.
just quickly, so it's not a march, but for whoever is in Washington, D.C. next week for the National Alliance to End Homelessness Conference, we will also be having our Capitol Hill Day, which is a great opportunity for those who are able to participate to go and talk directly with your congressional members. And so if you will be in DC and registered and you're not already signed up or planning to attend, please reach out to me. We will also have an advocacy hub starting on the first day of the conference. And so you can come and talk to me and my team about both what you can do on Capitol Hill Day as well as the other 364 days of the year. So.
Sorry, I'm just putting my email into the chat here because that was requested again. Some folks have asked about what they can do with local mayors, with other elected officials, along the lines of what Marcy was saying. The most important thing to do is to educate them, to bring people with lived expertise of criminalization of homelessness into those meetings with you and talk about the harms that are actually imposed on people, and share how this, even though criminalizing homelessness may appear politically expedient at first, it does nothing to actually solve the problem of homelessness. It actually makes it worse. It gives people arrest records, fines and fees that they can't pay. And if people's interest, if the elected officials' interest is actually in ending the encampments on the streets of our country, criminalization makes those camps last longer. It might push it off of one street corner, but because you haven't solved that person's homelessness, it's just going to pop up at somewhere else because people need a place to live and sleep. And if there isn't enough available affordable housing in the community, then they have to do these interim solutions just to survive. So, having those meetings, talking in your neighborhood listservs, I think one of the most important things we see is in a lot of places, these sort of next door or other neighborhood listservs is where a lot of bad information gets shared, and people say, I'm worried about homelessness in our community, and then go in all the wrong directions. We need people down at that level saying, I agree with you. People shouldn't be forced to live on the streets. And here's the constructive things we can do to actually help get them off the streets, rather than having that turn into a place where you're going to start seeing the community pressure to criminalize and to harm people experiencing homelessness. Um, uh, all these other questions about FAQs, other talking points and things like that. We have a number of documents already on our website, and yeah, we're still processing. We will try to get to creating a lot more resources in the coming weeks, and we will get those up on our website and out to our mailing lists as soon as possible. With that, we've got about 3 minutes left. I don't know if there's any other questions that people saw that they wanted to make sure they could answer, or if we want to just move to sort of closing statements from everybody. What we can combine that. So I will turn it over to Will first, and then kind of go around.
There are far too many for me to get into. I've been trying to answer. If I haven't answered your question, I encourage you to look at the answered questions section. I've probably answered a very similar question in writing.
All right. Marcy, do you have anything you want to say?
Just that I'm grateful to be a part of this movement. I've been thinking a lot about just how dark everything feels, how hard everything feels, and I've had some moments of reflection, and I just hope that everyone will join me in letting love be the thing that drives us forward, and remembering why we got into this work, and letting that be our focus as we go forward.
Thanks, Marcy. Helen, do you want to say anything?
Just from the homeless community here in Grants Pass, as well as myself. Thanks for letting us, have hope, and and knowing that there's somebody out there is it means everything to us.
We are here for you, Helen, and you haven't heard the last from us or from the rest of this community.
Thank you.
And Antonia, you want to close this out?
Really, just thank you everyone for being here. Please continue to follow either through johnsonvgrantspass.com website, or the Law Center's Twitter feed at Homeless Law or at H&H Campaign to follow our content. Marcy shared the Alliance's content. We are going to continue to put pieces out. We're so grateful for the energy that everyone brought today in solidarity with the residents of Grants Pass. Helen, thank you so much for being here. Congressman Frost, thank you so much for being here. And we will continue to fight this together.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Be in touch.
Thank you.